Welcome to today's Explainer. We're looking at the rise, fall, and pivot of the Humane AI Pin. We're going to unpack one of the most dramatic, fascinating, and frankly humbling stories in modern tech history. Think massive piles of venture capital, an incredibly ambitious vision, and a bold attempt to completely replace the smartphone. So, what happens when an Apple legend tries to kill the smartphone? That is the central question we're tackling today. I mean, we rely on our screens for literally everything, right? But what happens when the very people who helped create our screen-addicted world decide, hey, it's time to destroy it? Let's trace the meteoric rise and the incredibly sudden crash of Humane to figure out exactly what went wrong and what it all means for the future of artificial intelligence. Moving right into the visionary and their pedigree of innovation. To really understand Humane, you first have to understand the founders behind it, Imran Chaudhry and Bethany Bongiorno. Consider Imran Chaudhry's legacy. He has deeply shaped the way you and I live our daily lives. He started as an intern at Apple back in 1995 and rose all the way up to design director. Every single time you look at that grid of square apps on your smartphone, that's his work. Pinching to zoom on a photo, the classic slide to unlock, he invented those. He's named on thousands of patents and helped build the interfaces for the iPad and the Apple Watch. So when a guy who basically invented our touch-based world says he knows what comes next, the entire tech industry listens. Which leads us to the concept of the disappearing computer. In 2018, they left Apple to start Humane, chasing a totally radical new idea. Soon, one day, technology would become invisible, and the computer would disappear. That's a quote from legendary tech journalist Walt Mossberg. Chaudhry actually anchored Humane's entire mission to this quote during a viral TED Talk he gave in 2023. For them, this wasn't just some clever marketing slogan. It was their foundational philosophy. They genuinely believed the future wasn't about strapping a heavy VR headset to your face or just making a slightly better smartphone screen. It was about pure invisibility. Screenless, seamless, and sensing. That was their three-word mantra. The goal was to use these huge, recent leaps in AI to anticipate what you need without ever pulling you out of the real world. Imagine an AI that hears what you hear, sees what you see, and just operates quietly in the background. They wanted to fix the balance that they felt had been fundamentally broken by the very devices they built back at Apple. And then, after 5 years of intense, super secretive development, the curtain was finally pulled back. Enter the A Pin, the physical manifestation of all those massive goals. So what was this thing actually packing under the hood? Well, the AI Pin was a wearable device. It had a camera and this wild laser projector that literally beamed a green monochromatic interface right onto the palm of your hand. Pretty sci-fi, right? It ran on their own proprietary software called Cosmos, which was deeply integrated with OpenAI's ChatGPT. And get this, it didn't even need your phone. It had its own standalone T-Mobile connection. The price tag for this glimpse into the future? A cool $699 upfront for the hardware, plus a mandatory $24 a month subscription. The sheer amount of industry hype this generated was absolutely staggering. Backed by tech titans, Humane became a total Silicon Valley darling. They raised over $230 million and hit a $900 million valuation. And that was before a single product was even shipped to consumers. With massive names like OpenAI's Sam Altman and Salesforce's Mark Benioff backing them, their momentum felt totally unstoppable as they geared up for their launch in April 2024. But then, April 2024 actually arrived, and that hype cycle slammed into a massive, unforgiving brick wall. The harsh reality. The worst product I've ever reviewed. Ouch. There is probably no quote that captures the crash of Humane's hype cycle better than this one. Marques Brownlee, MKBHD, who is arguably the most influential tech reviewer on the planet, released a video with that exact title. For a company built by Apple's top design perfectionists, this was a complete disaster. And the crazy part? He wasn't an outlier. Across the board, reviewers were reporting the exact same fundamental issues. When we compare the promises to the everyday reality, the picture gets pretty bleak. Humane promised rapid, contextual AI assistance. The reality? Users reported agonizing delays that made having a natural conversation basically impossible. The promise of seamless real-time translation, it totally failed in languages like Japanese and Korean. And that futuristic laser projector we talked about, completely unreadable in outdoor sunlight. Worse, the device physically overheated. Reviewers said it felt like a hot puck burning against their chests. Naturally, these practical flaws had immediate business consequences. 100,000. That was Humane's incredibly ambitious internal sales target for the first year. They genuinely believed the market was completely ready to abandon their screens. But here is the stark reality: 10,000. By early 2024, sources reported that actual sales were sitting at roughly 10,000 units. They achieved barely 10% of their goal. But actually, scratch that. As bad as the low sales figures were, there was a secondary metric that was doing even more damage to the company: $1 million. That represents the value of AI pins that were returned by early adopters between May and August alone. Internal data showed there were literally days where more pins were being returned than bought. And here's the real kicker. Because of T-Mobile's network limitations tying the device to a specific user, Humane couldn't easily refurbish and resell these returns. So they were just left holding a mountain of unsellable inventory. The hardware failure was undeniable, and their massive cash burn rate became totally unsustainable. It was time for a corporate rescue. Enter HP. In February 2025, computing giant HP Inc. stepped in. They bought Humane's core assets, which included its Cosmo S operating system, hundreds of patents, and its top engineering talent, for $116 million. Remember, this was a company once valued at $900 million. As a direct result of the acquisition, the iPin was officially discontinued. The bold experiment was over. But, the talent and the core software didn't just disappear. Instead, we're seeing a total pivot to enterprise AI. Chaudhry is now the Senior Vice President of Design and Innovation at HP. His team is taking Humane's AI tech and integrating it into enterprise products. Think AI-powered PCs, smart printers, and connected corporate conference rooms. So the technology survived, it just found a much more traditional home. When you step back and map out the timeline of all this, it is truly breathtaking. From the ambitious founding back in 2018 to the peak hype of the 2023 TED Talk, straight into the brutal reality check of the April 2024 launch, and finally, the HP acquisition in February 2025. It is a textbook example of the incredibly fast, unforgiving life cycle of a hardware startup. So the crucial takeaway we're left with is this: the Humane AI Pin undeniably failed. The tech wasn't ready, the physics of lasers and heat dissipation worked against them, and people ultimately just missed their smartphone screens. But I want to leave you with a question to reflect on. Was Imran Chaudhry's vision of ambient, invisible computing fundamentally wrong? Or, was it simply ahead of its time? The AI pin might be gone, but the desire to look up from our screens is stronger than ever. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep your eyes open. The post-smartphone era might still be out there, just waiting for the right moment.